The Commodore 64 was remarkable. Released in 1982 and remaining on store shelves for an astounding 11 years until finally reaching end of life in 1993, the C64 still holds the Guinness World Record for best-selling computer model of all time. Capable of what were amazing for the time 8-bit graphics and digitized audio tracks, the Commodore was the gateway into PC enthusiasm for an entire generation. We had one growing up in the 80s, and while consoles eventually became too powerful to ignore, the C64 still stuck around in our living room until ultimately being replaced by a 486-based machine in the early 90s. Today, I'm lucky enough to have parlayed that experience into a career in tech, and I want to see if I could recapture some of that magic by building a modern PC into the shell of the original home computer. Simple yet stylish, the Be Quiet Dark Power 12 is everything you need in a high-end power supply. Fully modular and featuring a frameless Silent Wings fan, the Dark Power 12 achieves the highest 80+ titanium efficiency rating. And they even provide you an easy way to enable the single-rail performance mode with the flip of a switch. Rest easy with Be Quiet's 10-year warranty and enjoy some of the most efficient and reliable power delivery in the industry with the Dark Power 12. Check out the link below to learn more. So guys, this project is unfortunately probably going to take 2 videos to complete. Initially, I did want to do it in one, but I've been playing around, mocking up certain sizes and what I could potentially fit inside of the Commodore, and I think it's going to require a little bit extra work. So if you don't want to miss out on part 2 or any other PC related cool build projects like this, make sure you get subscribed, hit that like button down below, follow me on Twitter at BPS_customs. But we've got some parts laid out here on the table behind me. Let's take a closer look at what we are doing and then hopefully get some parts laid out in such a way that we could have an idea moving forward of what kind of fabrication might be necessary to make this project a reality. So for this project, I did not want to butcher a working Commodore 64. That would just kind of be blasphemy, to me at least. So what I did was I went on eBay and I picked up actually just a shell of a Commodore 64. This is what they looked like initially, but obviously it's got no electronics in it aside from the keyboard. And I also picked up a disk drive. Now, I think using this disk drive would almost kind of be cheating. This is probably a larger volume than a lot of the small form factor PCs that you find on the market today, and I think we could probably put something in here really easily, and I think I want to try to avoid that. But we have this as a backup just in case. But the main goal is to take this Commodore 64 shell unit and use it to mount some mini ITX hardware. Now, that is going to pose a problem because I want to maintain the keyboard, and the keyboard is mounted to this piece here. So I need to find a way to remove a lot of this material while maintaining the keyboard itself on the exterior and create space inside of this shell for our components. Now, the components we're going to use are a mini RX 560. Not the most powerful GPU, but honestly, it is the smallest one that I own. And I think for playing esports titles or whatever, this will be just fine. This isn't going to be a hugely powerful gaming PC. We have an MSI Meg Unify Z490 motherboard with an i3-10100, Noctua low profile cooler, and 16 gigs of Corsair DDR4 memory. And underneath this heat spreader here is a PNY SSD. I've already pre-assembled this whole unit because it's just to save us some time here. You guys have seen all this stuff put together before. And then we have a flex power supply. Now, I used this power supply when I built the world's smallest gaming PC about a year ago, I think. And it worked really well. It's 500 watts, which is more than we're going to need for this kind of a system build. And it is obviously a different form factor than you normally see, even with SFX units. Now, an SFX power supply would not fit in here height-wise. This, obviously, is much slimmer, but it does have a decent footprint to it. So I think the ideal layout is actually going to be something along the lines of this motherboard in the middle with the power supply on one side and the graphics card on the other side. Now, this is going to have to be achieved via a riser cable, and we are likely going to have to mod this case here in order to accommodate some things like the Wi-Fi antennae and I/O coming in and out of the motherboard, as well as the power cord and video outs. So the back here, I'm probably going to have to do some dremeling and cutting, but I want to maintain the integrity of the way this is laid out right now. So if you look at it, it all fits inside of this footprint. However, height-wise is a different story. Now, if we didn't have this piece in here and it was just the keys protruding from the top part, then I don't think we'd have any issue at all. But I'm afraid that if I remove this, we're gonna actually lose everything that holds the keys in place. And we're just gonna end up with like an empty hole here, which is not what I want. So what I wanna do is I wanna try to remove this centerpiece, this brown piece with all these tiny screws, and see if this is actually what is holding the keyboard in place or if there's something else, because I honestly haven't taken this apart yet. But once we have everything in place, you can see that this is actually a power LED. So that will hook up directly to our motherboard with no problem. And then I'm likely gonna have to drill a small hole here for some kind of a power button that'll connect to like the front panel connectors on the motherboard. But I think that given the fact that footprint-wise this fits, as long as we could hollow this shell out a little bit, that we should be able to have everything mounted. But you guys kind of see my dilemma in that I wanted to get this all done in one video, but I think it's going to require a little more planning and fabrication. So while the components I think are pretty locked in and I think will work really well, spacing is an issue, and I'm going to get to work on that right now. Well, okay, with the brown PCB out, you could actually see that the keys themselves are connected to that plastic housing. Now, they're not going to fall out. They actually are pretty sturdy in place. However, if I want the keys to stay a part of this setup, I'm going to need to keep at least some of this plastic in place and connected to this chassis. Otherwise, the keys themselves have nothing to, latch onto, because they're all one unit. I can't just replace the keycaps here. So what I did was I mocked up our spacing here and started to kind of fiddle with the height that I would need at certain points inside of this case. Let me put this on here and show you guys where there is actually interference height-wise, because if you come down and look at this way, you can see that the highest points are actually the CPU cooler and then the 24 pin. The graphics card is actually significantly lower, and the power supply is at least a little bit lower. So right now our limiting factors are the cooler and this 24 pin cable. So let's see what they're hitting inside of there, and and how we can modify this so that everything fits. Here's the problem with the 24 pin, which is right here and is the tallest part of the system basically. All this wiring can actually kind of just be squished down into the space, but obviously we can't do that right here. And this is hitting here, which is this black bracket. So I'm gonna have to cut out a section of this black bracket here in order to fit down over the 24 pin. And once we do that, then we could actually see what interference is being caused by the cooler, which would be hitting much further inside of this case, but isn't actually making contact just yet because the 24 pins in the way. So let me cut away a piece of this and we'll see where we're at. Took a couple of steps here off camera, removed a big piece of this plastic, screw retainer panel, as well as this anchor point, and it now fits over the cabling as necessary. However, found that the next pinch point is actually going to be this bar back here, which is hitting the top of the I/O cover and the top of the power supply. Now the GPU is going to be low enough where I don't think there's going to be any clearance issues at all. The biggest problem that I'm running into is, okay, now I have to remove, you know, this mounting piece right here, but that means that if I do so, I'm going to be missing the retainer for this half of the keyboard up top and this half of the keyboard on the bottom, and we're only going to be secured in by like 4 screws, and the keyboard itself is already a little bit loose because it's not secured here if I press on this hard enough. So what I'm thinking is I'm going to take this keyboard piece out. I'm going to trim off all of this, you know, high profile bracket right here that screws in, and then I'm going to epoxy the keyboard to the top of the case using these pieces that kind of jut out from where the keys are, because if you flip it over, you can see that where the keys end, there's actually plenty of space like here, which corresponds to this piece under here. So I should have room to be able to glue and then eliminate these higher profile brackets that are being used to screw into the case. So hopefully that will help out tremendously. Back in a second. Ended up not using epoxy. Instead, I just attached everything with Gorilla Tape, which actually is holding on really well. And this does give me the ability, if I need to detach this, that I could probably do so without harming this piece. Whereas with epoxy, that wouldn't have been possible. So we have this now attached without screws and without any of the little black mounting pieces that were kind of getting in the way of everything, and still keys are functional and in place. So let's see how this fits. So we're gonna have to end things here today. Unfortunately, I kind of hit a problem where I took out my PCIe riser cards because I wanted to get everything actually hooked up and test it before I try to mount these things down. And I realized that I only have pretty long risers, whereas I need like the shortest one possible to fit in here without any slack. We can't have anything dangling over on this end. The biggest problem I have right now is like this edge of the cooler is actually just barely touching the inside of this mechanism, this keyboard mechanism. I think with some finagling, I can either, I don't know, it would be dangerous to try to shave this down, but I'm going to make it work. I also have to figure out a way to mount all the hardware in here, and I can't make it any taller, which poses a problem, which means I can't use standoffs. So I have to use something that's non-conductive, and I'm thinking that I might try to use hot glue, because hot glue is not hot enough to melt any components or solder on the back of the graphics card or the motherboard, and it should hold pretty well. To be honest, this is going to be a pretty tight fit regardless, so it's not really going to shift around, but I just do need something to keep the components in place. So I think hot glue. If you guys have any suggestions though, please let me know down below in the comments. Also, I have to do some more cutting, so that needs to be cut out for the power supply cable. That needs to be cut out for the motherboard I/O, and then I need to do some more cutting on the back side here where the blue marker is for the display outs. But I think in the next video we should be able to get this done, and I'm actually really excited for it. This is such a perfect fit for this layout and footprint. I'm really happy with the component selection. I do wish maybe that the GPU that we're going to be using was a little more powerful, but to be honest, anything at this point that's going to end up working, I'm going to be a-okay with. And yeah, so that's part one of our project. Part two we will finish, hopefully, I guess. But that is the goal, and make sure you get subscribed so you don't miss it. And yeah, Commodore 64 build, guys. This is going to be super awesome when it's all done. And I kind of wish LAN parties were still a thing, because this would be a great system to take to a LAN party. But thanks a lot for watching, guys. Hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.